All right, this video is going to be the first in a series about making predictions. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is some considerations about predictions in a very general sense that's very helpful to always keep in mind when making a prediction. And then we're going to start looking at how to use Vimshottari Dasa in a very basic sense. All right, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to watch this little video of mine. I always appreciate it. Do your little YouTube viewer things that you do so well with the subscribing and the liking and the thumbs upping, the thumbs downing, whatever it is that you do, whatever. I just feel like it's obligatory for a YouTube video that I say that. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and start looking at this. I'll make this video very short and very concise. I'm not going to be repeating myself. I'm going to keep everything that I'm talking about, my notes that I usually have written down. I'm going to put them on the screen for this. And because there's going to be a certain point when we get into talking about Vimshottari Dasa in specific, where you're probably going to want to pause it. And you might even want to rewind to those points where it was on the screen. So, first and foremost, when it comes to making predictions, there are two types of predictions. Very simple. I mean, there's probably more than that, but for the most part, what it is those that are requested by the client. Very simple. Person might want to know about when they want to get married, how their career is going to do, things of that nature, or they might be interested just in what's going to happen in this time period. So that's the first type. The second type of prediction are what jumps out at you when you're reading a chart. These, of course, are my favorite predictions. Person might be asking about, oh, am I going to get married in the next 3 months? And you're like, actually, you're going to be losing your job. I don't know, because you're just reading the chart. And so, and then basically, so these little 4 steps that I have right here. So what I like to do personally when I'm watching a video is I like to get right to the point of what we're going to talk about and then extrapolate on it later in the video, because I don't like to make people wait, because I know how it is. You want to know what I have to say. Here's what it is. So first and foremost thing that you have to do when it comes to making predictions is you have to read the entire chart. There's a couple of different levels to this. Obviously what this means is, to read the chart in its entirety. And what that can entail is to look at what it's telling you and just let the chart speak to you. Because it's easy when we go back here and the client is requesting something like marriage, that you're just going to want to focus on 1st house, 7th house, 9th house. And then just focusing on Jupiter in a woman's chart or Venus in a man's chart, etc. It's so easy to get locked into that. So the first and foremost thing is to read the entire chart. Get a feel for what the chart is telling you. Let it speak to you. Don't just try to extract information from it, especially if you're just opening the chart and you're punching in their information into your software for the first time. Look at the chart, read it, absorb what's there before diving into it. Can't tell you how important that is. And then the other part is, and this is very important with right here what I have, read the entire chart. What this is referring to is to use the Vargas. So again, if we were talking about the client comes in asking about marriage, then, or you just see marriage as something that's important in this chart, it just jumps out to you like, oh, marriage, I don't even know why. I'm just looking at this chart and I'm thinking marriage. You have to look not just at the 1st house, 9th house, 7th house, all those things you would look at, but you need to look into the Vargas, look into the Saptamsha, look into the Navamsha, look at all the Shodasha Vargas, those 16 Vargas that Parashara requests to use, and especially the ones that are pertinent, like I said with marriage, looking at the Saptamsha and especially the Navamsha. And seeing what those have to say. And so read the chart in its entirety, read it in its depth. So read it, let it speak to you, and then get into the specifics of it and look at the depth of what the chart is saying. And so that's the first thing, is read the chart. Second step is you find the Mahadasha Lord. Simple enough, right? You're like, okay, let me look down here. What dasha is it? Etc. Then step 3, you find the connections. You find, and what I mean by this is you find what the Mahadasha Lord is getting involved with, what it's connected with, what it's going to want to produce. And then secondly, when you get into the Antardasha Lord, that's what ADL is, Antardasha Lord, MDL is Mahadasha Lord, is you find the confluence between the Antardasha Lord, or the Bhukti, whichever word you prefer to use, and the Mahadasha Lord. And you find out, oh, look, Mahadasha Lord points to marriage, Antardasha Lord points to marriage. Oh, look at this. This is very possible during this period of time. And so that's basically it. You read the chart, find the Mahadasha Lord, find out what it's connected to, find the Antardasha Lord, and find what it's connected to, and find where those two are showing the same thing, and then that's when you can start to see the thing being produced. Now, when it comes to dashas, before I even get any further into it, maybe I'll mention it later, there's five levels of Vimshottari Dasa. And so basically, if you were getting into the Pratyantardasha, which is the next bhukti below the Antardasha, it's the same thing. You find the relationship that the Antardasha has, the agenda that it has, that it wants to produce, what it's connected with, and you make sure you find the Pratyantardasha that is also supporting this. And this is how you get into a finer period of time. So anyhow, so that's basically the steps that we're going to be using in this short course of using Vimshottari Dasa in this video. And now, here's just some things to take into consideration. These are the considerations when it comes to predictions. So first thing I wrote here is consider the practical chance of the event happening by looking at the age of the person. So, for example, if we're talking about somebody wanting to know when they're going to get married and they're only 13 years old and it looks like a good dasha right now, consider the possibility that maybe especially if they're in America, that they're probably not going to get married at age 13. The chances of that happening are very, very slim, let's just say that, for many reasons. I think even legally, I don't think you can get married before 18. Might be wrong, don't know, but it's things like that. Always consider that, so exactly like it says here, if they're too young or they're too old, eliminate the improbabilities. So you can figure out right away, if someone's saying, when am I going to get married? And you see that, let's say their best dasha happens at age 75, or their best dasha happens at age 7. Kind of realize that it's probably not going to be happening during those two dashas. So maybe you want to look towards these specific dashas and the time periods that are happening right now. And then I always say this, consider averages and statistics. Best way to start is Google, like if you want to find out when someone's going to get married, first of all, what's the average age? And start from there. It's a great place to start from, because then you can look, let's say the average age is 27. Well, find out what dasha they're in at age 27. And look at, does that look like a time of marriage? And then consider what the chart says. If the chart says delays, because if you have an average, then if something shows delays, like, I don't know, Saturn in the 7th house or Saturn in the 9th house or Rahu doing the same thing, right? Well, considering the averages, if you know there's going to be a delay, then you could know that, well, geez, looks like this chart, maybe I should look at dashas that are going to be when the person's in their 30s. Because if age 27 is it and there's delays, it's probably going to be in the 30s. On the other half of the equation, if it looks like a lot of things are showing marriage, and there's a lot of good indications because you looked at the entire chart, then maybe you want to say that they were married, that maybe in their early 20s or something like that. So anyways, And the other part is know your client / chart. And what I mean by that is, what I don't mean by that is know the client. Like, you have to know everything about them. What I mean by that is know where they're from. Know the culture that they are coming from, right? And then also know the chart and what the chart says that the person's going to get involved in. If there's so many things in the chart that are showing career and the person's asking about marriage, well, you know, I mean, you might be like, well, you know, you're going to have to, are you okay with putting those things on hold? So you want to know that. And in this, and then let's say, let's get away from marriage here. And let's say that you're talking about, let's say you're talking about like getting a vehicle, for example. And you're seeing a lot of Venus and fourth house stuff going on, which fourth house is conveniences and conveyances, and Venus involved could be a vehicle. In America, you'll probably say, oh yeah, this will probably be a time that you'll get a new car. And that will make sense because in America, there's more cars than there are people. Now, if you're talking to somebody from Kenya or something like that, where maybe, and I'm sorry if you're from Kenya and this offends you, and I apologize. I don't know. Maybe Kenya has a lot of cars. Maybe it doesn't. I'm just saying maybe a person that lives in a more impoverished area and comes from a more impoverished culture where cars aren't as normal as they are here in America, then maybe that might mean something different. You might want to shift your focus to. So just know that, kind of know the context of where the person is coming from. And then when it comes to predictions, know where your prediction is coming from. Is it an intuition or is it analysis? And so basically what I mean by that is, like, if you're looking at a chart, and this is kind of what all these little points, I'm just going to kind of tie all these together here, is know where they're coming from. Because if it's coming from a place of intuition, then analysis is going to work against intuition. It's very important to really consider that, because intuition, sometimes it just sparks at us like, oh my gosh, I think it's going to be this dosh. I bet they're going to get married. And like, maybe it's not a thought, but it's just a kind of a realization that comes up. Well, you might want to trust that. You want to listen to your gut. You want to listen to that initial reaction. You don't want to question it, because you may suffer from paralysis of analysis. Because you might analyze yourself out of your intuition. So just be aware of that. Just be aware when you get an intuitive hit to go with it. And then if you're uncertain about, like, gee, I just don't know if this is going to be the case, take the time and ask yourself why you don't know that. Is it because you're not sure of your techniques? You're not sure of your ability to make predictions? Or is it because the chart says two different things, right? Well, this time, I don't know, I can see here that the seventh lord is in neutral dignity, and, you know, it's, you know, and then maybe its Shadbala is a little bit low or something like that. You're like, I don't know. But it's also placed in an angle, so maybe that means it's going to be easier for it to produce. Like, you see some things against it, some things for it. And so there's a reason why that can lead to uncertainty. And so just realize that. Just be laser in on uncertainty when it's there, and ask yourself where it's coming from. Because sometimes uncertainty is your gut feeling saying no. That's another thing. You might have a gut feeling like, I just don't think it's going to happen. And so sometimes you have to go with that. And that's what trusting your initial reaction is about also, is sometimes the initial reaction is no. And so anyways, and then if you are analyzing the chart, you're using analysis, use everything you have at your disposal. Don't just know that, don't just look at it and be like, oh, they've got Jupiter in the 7th house. Oh, that means that they should be looking to get married right away or something like that. Where I'm sure there's probably some truth to that, right? But then also maybe the 7th lord is debilitated and it's with Saturn and Rahu and the 8th lord, or the 6th lord, excuse me. So it's like really showing a lot of delays and not able to produce as much. So always look deeper. Get into the Vargas. Look at all that. And then, this is my favorite one, because this is my favorite thing to do, is I put a little star here, a little asterisk, and this is the advanced thing, is learn how to read the story of the chart and learn how to differentiate between the reality and the story and how to really give them both. And what I mean by that is like, so there's a reality which is just like house lords in houses, right? So the seventh lord is with the third lord and stuff like that to see the connections. And it's one thing to be able to see which concrete things are involved with which concrete things. Now, that's one thing, but then there's also the idea of like avashtas, Vimshottari avashtas in specific. If you don't know these, I suggest you learn them. It has everything to do with the natural relationships of the planets and how much they're influencing each other. And I can get into this in another video. I'm not going to get into it here, but what it does is it tells you the story, kind of the ups and downs and why that happens. And so it's really interesting to get in the story of like, oh, this is a time period where you might have been dealing with a difficult, like you're talking about somebody's career, you might be like, yeah, it's a time period where you had a boss that was making you feel like it made it hard for you to express yourself. And then you went into this time period, and then this is the period where you were working on your own, but you were finding these different struggles with the people that were working underneath you, your employees. You know, it's like it's that kind of, that's the story when you're able to add the details of it. And that's what really makes a reading fun, is when you can get into that flow. And that's a little bit more advanced thing, but I figured I'd put it there. So anyhow, let's get into the Mahadasha lords. Now talking about Vimshottari. First rule of Vimshottari Dasa, making predictions. I didn't put it here, but it's the first rule, is the Mahadasha lord is going to set the stage for what events are even capable of happening. So for example, if the Mahadasha lord, they're asking about marriage, and let's say the Mahadasha lord is showing nothing but trouble for marriage, right? It has no agenda for it. It's not related to any of these. It's not the Karaka. It's not the house. It's not ruling that house. It's not ruling that Karaka. It's not ruling the house lord, etc., etc. It's not following these steps. Then chances of predicting marriage during that time is probably not going to be the best thing for you to do. And so that's the first, and it doesn't matter. So if you're looking at the Mahadasha lord and it doesn't show marriage, but you're looking at the next Antardasha lord underneath it, the smaller time period, and it is showing marriage, well, that Antardasha lord's not going to give the marriage if the Mahadasha lord isn't, if the Mahadasha lord doesn't show a capability to produce that event, then you can't use the Antardasha lord supporting it to expect it to produce that event. So that's very, very most important primary rule of Vimshottari Dasa, is the Mahadasha lord is sort of like the overarching mechanism that determines which events can even take place. So important, so important. So don't look at an Antardasha lord to find an event that the Mahadasha lord doesn't support. If Mahadasha lord doesn't support the event, Antardasha lord does, not going to happen. And then let's go ahead and turn that the other way around when we're talking about the Mahadasha lord and the Antardasha lord. Well, if the Mahadasha lord does support the event and the Antardasha lord doesn't support the event, well, it's probably not going to happen during that Antardasha. You're probably going to find another Antardasha. And so that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So now, for the Mahadasha lord, you got to find out what it's connected with. You want to find out what events it is? Well, it's very simple. You see what it's a Karaka for. And what I have here is both the natural Karaka and the Jaimini Charaka, or the Jaimini Chara Karakas, which those are the movable Karakas, which are based upon how far a planet is through a sign. So if we're talking about marriage, you want to find the, is it a natural Karaka like Venus, right? Is it a Jaimini Chara Karaka, which would be the Dara Karaka, the planet with the lowest degree in a sign? And then you want to know if the planet rules a house. Then you want to see if a planet rules a Karaka, because maybe the The Mahadasha Lord is Saturn, which himself doesn't naturally represent marriage. And maybe Saturn doesn't rule the 9th house or the 7th house, but maybe Saturn rules Venus. Or maybe Saturn rules the 7th Lord, or Saturn rules the 9th Lord. That's now knowing that the Mahadasha Lord, which is always wanting to produce what is in its signs, then that's what it's trying to produce. So now, planet rules house counted from the Karaka. So, for example, if you're looking at marriage, and you're looking at a man's chart especially, you might want to look at not just, maybe Saturn doesn't, maybe none of these rules apply, but Saturn rules the 9th house from Venus. So maybe Venus is placed in Gemini, and Saturn rules Aquarius, which is the 9th from Gemini, which gives Saturn now has an agenda and is connected with marriage. Then you want to look at the planet rules the house counted from, okay, we talked about that. Then the planet, there's something called Bhavam. And so what this is maybe Saturn rules the 5th house. So if you're looking at marriage being associated with the 9th house, maybe Saturn rules the 5th house. Because if you're looking at the 9th from the 9th house, that's what Bhavam is counting the same number from whatever that house is. The 4th from the 4th, the 3rd from the 3rd. In this case, the 9th from the 9th is the 5th house. So Saturn rules the 5th house. Then there's a possibility that Saturn has something to do with marriage. And then this one too. This is a little bit more esoteric, and you really have to know the rules of astrology here, because this list is kind of like top-down way to look at it. So there's a planet is activating a house by placement. So maybe Saturn, because he's the Mahadasha Lord, is in the 9th house. So it's like it's getting involved in 9th house activities. Something to consider. And then we get into something called Rashi aspects. I'm not going to explain what Rashi aspects are. That'll take a whole other video. But if you know what these are, congratulations. If a planet is Rashi aspecting a house, then possibly it's looking to produce that house. It's very important to understand what Rashi aspects are. And then a planet could be Rashi aspecting a house lord. And so these are kind of the ones. But these three at the bottom, I left them at the bottom because they're the bottom 3. And they're probably, depending on what planet we're talking about, is about whether it's actually going to be producing those things, or maybe it's going to be actually taking away from those things. So now let's get down to looking at the Antardasha Lord. Now, see, earlier in the video, I mentioned something, and I talked about, like, you might want to rewind the video. Well, this is the thing. For the Antardasha Lord, when I say here, the same rules as Mahadasha Lord for analytical purposes, then go back to these reasons right here. Antardasha Lord, same thing. I'm not going to go over what I just said. I already said that. So just what you need to know when it comes to the Antardasha Lord, first and foremost, a Bhukti Lord, in this case the Antardasha Lord, will only produce an event that the Mahadasha Lord is indicating. I already talked about that. That's the first rule. First rule, make sure that the Mahadasha Lord is indicating that event. Don't just look to the Antardasha Lord first. And then, so same rules that I already showed you. And so once you look and you see that Saturn, let's say Saturn rules Venus, so we know that, oh, well, Saturn has an agenda for marriage, right? It has a connection to marriage because Venus is the natural karaka. Saturn rules that karaka. And then maybe the Antardasha Lord that you're looking at is Venus. Well, geez, there's a huge connection there. That's the overlap and confluence. Venus is the natural karaka and Saturn is ruling it. And then look for the overlap. So Saturn is ruling Venus. They have Venus is going into Saturn's sign to produce its stuff, and Saturn is producing its sign, and it's the Mahadasha Lord. Whenever you see this happening, the Mahadasha Lord ruling the Antardasha Lord, there is a strong connection of them being connected to the same types of events. Because Saturn now is going to want to produce, Saturn being the Mahadasha Lord, is going to produce Venusian, whatever Venus's agenda is and what Venus is connected with. That's part of what Saturn's going to be doing. And so if you see that situation, that's a lot of overlap, a lot of confluence. And then another thing that you can look at is the relationship of the placement from the Mahadasha Lord to the Antardasha Lord. So let's say that Saturn and let's say the person's running that Saturn Venus, but Saturn doesn't rule Venus, but maybe Saturn and Venus are in a 5-9 relationship. If you count the Rashis away from each other, then that's another indicator of, you know, marriage right there. Oh, well, look, they're in a congruence of 9. We see the 5-9 relationship. And then here, this, I probably should have put a star here, is the Bhukti Lord supportive of the Mahadasha Lord. This is a lot more advanced of an idea, and it's something we're going to get into on the next page here. So basically what this means is, so Saturn and Venus, in this example I've been giving, they're natural friends. So it makes sense for Saturn to be producing, or it makes sense that this is going to be a time when these two planets are looking to produce the same things. And then this is also this, the Bhukti Lord, the Antardasha Lord being supportive of Mahadasha Lord. This is how we get into the story of what happens. It's not only these events are both being produced at this time, but it's also that it's going to move in a smoother fashion. So if these planets are in a good placement from each other, these planets are friends, and they carry the same agenda, and they're influencing each other, then you can be like, yeah, this is going to be a time where you feel like everything's not only going to get married, but everything's going to work out smoothly, or something of that nature. See, when you start getting into that, maybe if it were happening during Saturn's Sun or Saturn Moon period, they share the agenda, they're going to produce the same things, they're going to produce the marriage, but they are showing, but they're enemies to each other, and at the same time they're in a 6-8 relationship. It's like, yeah, you're going to get there, but there's going to be some delays, and there's going to be some changes that you are not going to expect, and it's going to hurt you, and you're going to have a difficult time with this emotionally. See, that's tying the story in. So anyways, now let's get into, finally we have the capacity to produce. So we've looked at what it is connected to. Now we always have to take into consideration, how strong is that planet going to produce something, right? So you want to look at whatever you know. So I've just kind of listed things here. This isn't necessarily in any order. In a certain way it is in an order. But anyway, so you want to look at the Shadbala strength of the planet. You want to look at conjunctions of cruel or gentle planets. You want to look at the dignity. You want to look at the house placement. You want to look at the Avashtas. Because this is really how you get into being able to tell the story of how things are connected. When you start knowing all these different factors that are right here, that's how we tell the story of the connection. This is where we start making really incredible predictions. So I'm not going to teach you how to do all these things, because a lot of the stuff is basic. Dignity is basic. House placement is basic. Conjunctions of cool or gentle planets, Shadbala, these are all things you should be able to open your astrology software and find out right away just by looking at the chart. Really easy stuff. But very powerful, and it's so fun when you start getting into all these layers. But there's a reason why this is part 1. Because there's more to predictions than just using one dasha system. By just using Vimshottari, you can make some incredible predictions. But there's so much more if you're wanting to become more precise. And so we're going to get into that in future videos. But for now, this seems to be what most people want to know about. Thank you if you made it all the way through this video. It was a little bit long-winded. But this is really the distillation of years of study put into about a 30-minute video. This is stuff that if you follow what I've given you here, you should be able to understand some charts, study some charts, study some charts of things that have happened in your own life. Like, oh, wow, look at this dasha. Look how these two planets were in a 6-8 thing. It had a 6-8 relationship. They both shared a career agenda, but they both shared an 8th house agenda. So this was the time when I lost my job. It's so fascinating when you start looking at these things. And then we're going to get into other timing methods. And other timing methods in the other parts of the videos, we're going to talk about transits. We're going to talk about Varshafala. We're going to talk about Jaimini's Rashi Dashas. And we can talk about natural ages of the planets and returns, planetary returns, which kind of falls into the transits category. Anyhow, there's just so much when it comes to making a prediction. And when you start seeing multiple things line up, that's when, if you're using the analysis method and not the intuition method, that you can really start to be confident that an event is going to happen and an opportunity is going to present itself for a person. So anyhow, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video, and namaste.